All right, welcome to Glitch Cube. We're a gaming podcast, and each week we take a deeper look into the art of video games. I'm Christian.
And I'm Chris.
And so what's been going on with you lately? It's been a little while since we talked. I know for the audience out there, it's only been a week, but for us, it's been a couple weeks. How's everything going with you? What are you up to lately?
I mean, it's good. I'm still doing that, trying to beat 40 games this year, and I'm finally at 38.
Dang.
So I only need 2 more, and I'm like, well, I got 9 days to beat 2 games, but I'm decided, you know what? I'm just gonna try 2 kind of short games, power through them. The last game I just beat was actually Cyberpunk, which was
Nice.
I could go on a long time about things I like and dislike about it, but to put it short, the world's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone's on the fence about this game, I would definitely say hold off on it unless you're very interested. I'm a big fan of the cyberpunk genre, so I went into it wanting to just get lost in the setting, right? I didn't go into the game for CD Projekt Red. I didn't go into it because I was expecting a Witcher kind of story. I just wanted to live in that setting, and I think that game does that part really well, but then falls on everything else. And I beat it once. I got the ending. I did quite a bit of the side missions, but there was still like tons I didn't do. Like the game is all side mission, and overall I spent maybe about 40 hours in it, and I enjoyed my time with it. The bugs were pretty bad. Like most of them were laughable, but then I would get crashes, and
Yeah, that's not okay.
yeah, you lose that immersion that you get, and
you're doing console, right?
Yeah,
See, it needs to
PS5.
It needs to be optimized for that. That's the newest console out too. Like that's not okay.
Well, it's because the whole next gen update for it doesn't even come out till months from now. So it was the PS4 game playing on the 5, and
that doesn't make any sense. They rushed that game.
Oh yeah,
and 40 hours for what it like the hype that doesn't feel like enough time.
Well, I mean, if I wanted to do all the side missions, like it would probably easily be over like maybe 60, 80 hours, you know, if I wanted to actually do everything. But honestly, the main story was kind of short. Like I really prolonged it by like goofing around. And to me, the side missions were better than the main mission at times. Like there was some cool stuff, but like you said, like it felt rushed. It just shows in everything, and it's sad because I mean, I was kind of excited for this game. Like I was hoping for all the things they were offering, like crazy new AI where you could follow an NPC and go about their daily life. Like that's cool, you know, like, but I knew that was asking too much. Like when I heard them talk about that, I'm like, there's no way that they're going to be able to do that, because all their other games were like third person adventure games. So them jumping into a first person, like that's a whole different step.
Right. It feels like it's another No Man's Sky story, honestly, where they promise a lot, they don't deliver, and then in like a year, it's actually going to be what they originally promised. But by that time, no one's going to really care about it, unfortunately. Because like you said, the game looks gorgeous. Like it looks amazing. I watched some playthrough videos of it, and it looks cool. But I mean, even watching the playthrough, I'm getting kind of bored watching it, to be completely honest. Just because I don't know, it felt like, I don't know, it was weird. When I was watching it, it just kind of felt like there wasn't a clear direction at some times. And that's the same thing that happened to me with some of the Fallout games too, where like you're going and then it's like, well, I mean, I guess I could do this, but there's nothing really like tying me to it. So why should I? Right? Like it doesn't really make it, from watching it, it didn't feel like it made me want to progress. or like continue with the story. I don't know. Maybe playing it's a different experience. But
I feel like what you just said is kind of the problem with open world games, in the sense that you can easily get distracted and lose interest because you're not set on a linear path, you know? And yeah, I felt that with this game. Like when I was doing the first few missions, like, oh, this is cool. Like this is badass. I'm enjoying it. And then when like Johnny Silverhand or Keanu Reeves' character gets more into it, I'm kind of like, okay, like this is cool, you know, but
it's also Keanu Reeves. Like, come on.
Yeah. And it was weird seeing him trying to be like a badass, like rocker, like considering how he is in real life, you know? So I'm like, he's not like an asshole like this in real life. Like this just feels so weird, you know? And I was going through that. And honestly, the thing I enjoyed most about was just driving around the city. Like the cars were fun. Like, yeah, the driving wasn't amazing, like Grand Theft Auto's like mechanics, but it was still just fun driving around the city that honestly looked different everywhere you went. Like a lot of open world games will reuse assets in different parts of the city to make up for it. Everything felt unique about the city.
That's good though. I mean, that's a plus, right?
Yeah.
So,
but overall, it's definitely a game that I would say like wait until next year. Like you said, No Man's Sky. Like hopefully they turn it around, make it amazing, like they did with that game, and you know,
it's just a shame. It's such a shame. Like there was so much buildup and hype, and I was really excited for this game, and then seeing it now, I'm like, oh, that's it.
Yeah, I feel bad for the people that worked on it, you know, all the crunch time and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, it still ended up being broken like the way it is. Like, it's kind of a bummer for him.
Yeah. Yeah, that's rough.
But aside from that, like, I haven't really been playing anything else. I just started playing Cat Quest. So,
oh, nice.
Decided to go for something a little more easy and lighthearted. That's actually really fun.
It's really fun. The mechanics in that game are great. And Cat Quest 2 is really good too.
That's what I hear. And I'm just like, dude, I'm enjoying the first one. Like, it's stupid, but like...
Cat Quest 2 is co-op as well.
Ooh.
Yeah, you can play as a dog. Yeah.
Dog. Oh, shit. Yeah. I'll be the dog.
There you go. I'll be the cat. Done.
Sick.
Yeah, let's do this.
That'll be a future episode.
Yeah, there we go. Cool.
But yeah, aside from that, that's about it. What about you?
I mean, I haven't really been playing a whole lot of games lately. I've been really curious about the mobile market lately. Just because they're coming out with a lot of interesting ports. Like Moonlighter got ported to the iOS, which is really cool, and I love that game, right? But mainly I've been studying a lot more of the card games and trying to get my card game set up because we have a playtest coming up later on this week. So I'm getting pretty excited about that one and just gathering all the materials, and we have all the playtest cards set currently created, and we've kind of pivoted pretty hard from our original concept to test out something new to see if it works or not. So that's kind of where we're sitting right now, and I'm really interested to see where it goes. And hopefully this has the right flow that we were looking for, and it just kind of works overall. So that's really all I've been doing lately. Is I haven't been playing much, but I've been studying and watching a lot of like playthroughs and just kind of looking at old games and games that have failed, and to see like, because most games that failed have like a nugget of something interesting in them. Like,
oh yeah.
So, and I always find it better to look at games that failed rather than successful games whenever you're trying to design something, because successful games, they follow the same model. If you want to just copy it, that's fine. But if you want to be innovative and trying to change something up, look at the games that failed to see what they were trying to do, because they could have done something that was ahead of their time. And maybe now is the right time for that kind of concept. So that's kind of my theory on that one, at least.
I kind of like that idea, like going back, looking at ones that failed and like...
Yeah, why did they fail? Like, what was the reason, right? So that's always...
Because you could look at ones that were unique back then, but failed, and be like, well, what if we adapted this unique thing to something modern? And you never know, you could turn it into something amazing.
Exactly. I mean, the biggest issue, though, with trying to look back at old games is most of these games that quote unquote failed or these bad games that we consider, they're not around anymore because they failed, right? And it's
True.
super hard to actually get these titles. And most of them, I mean, the only way to do it, unfortunately, is through emulators and downloading them, right? Because there's no other options. But so that kind of actually leads into the topic that we want to talk about today, and that's piracy in games. And unfortunately, like, it's kind of like a love-hate relationship for me, right? Like the game designer side of me is like, don't pirate my game, right? But at the same time, like I mentioned, if you're studying games and you're looking into trying to become a designer, most of the ways that you're actually going to be able to play these things is by downloading them through emulators. So it's kind of like a love-hate for me, and it's interesting. And I look at it as a way of conserving games, to say it at least. Like, because like I said, most of these games, they're not going to get ports, they're not going to get remade, we're not going to see them again. So the only way to do it is hopefully someone has a version of it that you then can download for your own playthrough. But
there's like conservation groups for that, where they like dump, they're trying to dump every game ever made, you know, and they kind of have a backing behind like game companies and stuff. But it's funny because it's like, yeah, they're dumping all these like versions of the game, but ultimately they're just all going to get leaked out anyway,
right?
You know,
exactly. So what for you at least, what's your view on piracy? How do you feel about it?
So for me, I look at it like this. For some games that don't get re-released, right? Say Earthbound, for example. It hasn't been on anything, I think, since the Wii U's like virtual shop.
Right.
And so with the Switch, it's not there. And copies of Earthbound loose are over $100, sometimes over $200, you know.
Which is just outrageous. That's ridiculous.
I mean, look at Chrono Trigger. Like, shining example, look at any old RPG for the most part, right? Super Nintendo, PlayStation. As someone who collects PlayStation games, it's a lot of them are over $80 to $100. Look at Persona, like 1 and 2, they're over $150. And to me, like, the collector inside's like, yes, I want him, but at the same time, I don't want to spend $200 and it doesn't even go back to the company. Like, it goes into another dude's pocket, right?
Yeah, you're not supporting the designers, you're supporting some dude that just had it in his, you know, in his attic or something.
Yeah. And I mean, if they release these games on a digital market,
they would sell.
Yeah, I'd buy them. I bet you thousands, millions of other people would buy it too.
Oh, I would gladly buy it, like, legally, right? Like, if these games came out on a marketplace that was legal and it went to the actual developers, I would totally buy it that way if that was an option. But that's not always an option, because some of these companies too don't even exist anymore, which is unfortunate to say, right? So it's just one of those, it's like, what do? You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. But like some of the titles that people talk about, like you said, Earthbound, right? As a perfect example, that game is amazing. It's a great RPG. And for people who want to make RPGs, I think that's one that everyone should play, to kind of look at that style, because it helped inspire other games in the future, right? So it's always good to look back at your roots. But where are you going to play it? If you don't have a Wii U, or you don't have a Super Nintendo, and you don't have $200 to shell out on that thing, and hopefully your Nintendo Works that you bought from Goodwill or whatever, right? Like, see, what's your other options there? There really aren't any.
I actually kind of lucked out. I forgot, like, years ago I bought it on my 3DS digitally, and I randomly like turned it on. I was like, oh my god, it's there. And that's how I recently like played through it.
See, but you bought it, and because it was available, right?
Yeah. And it's interesting because, so Mother 1, the original Earthbound, or the first game in the series that was on the NES, it wasn't released over here, right? And I think I remember reading it was like after Earthbound came out, people were interested in the first Mother. So it was one of the early translated ROMs back in the day. And everyone was downloading it just to see what it was. You know, it translated ROMs back like late 90s, early 2000s, they were a big deal because obviously we never were able to play them here.
Right.
And then on the Wii U, it was announced that, oh, this game's coming out on the virtual console, like fully translated, everything like that. And everyone's like, oh my God, like it's crazy that Nintendo would do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it is because it's not something they would normally do.
Yeah, that's a lot of resources for them on a title that they know probably won't bring in that much money, right?
It didn't.
Yeah.
And it's a bummer. I mean, I played a little bit of it, and it does feel very different after playing Earthbound. Like, it's very basic.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, it's still an Earthbound title. Like, it still looks the same.
Right.
And it made it interesting because it was like, oh, so Nintendo does listen. But it's like, do they just turn a blind eye half the time?
Well, I think it's a matter of, will this make money? Because ultimately they're a business,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they have to look at it that way. And I mean, Nintendo is notorious for really hating on people, on pirates, or people like downloading their games and making it really difficult to play these games outside of the original intent. And they're constantly like blaming the community themselves and saying like, oh, like these guys are trying to steal our games and our IPs. And like, if you look at even like streamers and stuff like that, they can't stream most Nintendo games. So they're constantly attacking these people on every upfront because they feel like they're taking money away from them. But I feel like if they allow these things to happen and kind of embrace it, it gets people excited for these games again and excited for that company, and in turn could potentially generate more revenue for them in the future.
Yeah, like Nintendo, I remember for years they had the Nintendo Creator Program on YouTube where like you had to be partnered with their little program in order to even do anything really Nintendo without getting in trouble. Like it's scary how, I mean, it's not scary. I guess I understand, like, you know, they want to be protective of their IP and stuff like that, but it's just, I don't know, the lengths are just, it's crazy compared to any other company, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
I think Nintendo is the harshest one in general.
Yeah.
And they are trying, right? Like, they do have their subscription service. You can't say that they don't try and port old games. So with their online subscription service, certain games are made available, but that library is so small compared to how many games were on that system. And it's a little disappointing, right? Like, there's maybe like 2 or 3 games that are actually kind of worth playing. But besides that, it's games that you would just be like, I'm okay. I don't need to play this. Or ones that you just have zero interest in, right? Like,
yeah, it's got an interesting list, and I mean, there are some bangers on there like Link to the Past, the Breath of the Fire games, but it's like they could add more. I mean, I know that they try to not upscale it, but make it so you can fast forward, rewind, like add the modern like features to it, but it's not that hard to put more on there, and they could so do that, and more people would subscribe to it if they had a bigger library. Like if they put even just more of their first party titles on it,
which
I think it would do a lot better.
I think that's all they can add, right? Is their first party titles. Because
like Breath of Fire is on there, and that's a Capcom game.
That's true. So they would have to get their rights from the Capcom as well. I just know that certain games are going to be very difficult, unfortunately, to make it to that service because of how many different hands they have to go through. Like, I mean, we haven't seen an N64 like streaming service through Nintendo yet, but like if they did, 007 would probably never make it on there, right? For example, because like if you look at it, yes, it's a Nintendo game originally, but it was made by Rare, and then it has the IP of 007, right? So if you think about trying to get those 3 companies working together to greenlight this game so it could be part of streaming, especially now that Rare is a part of Microsoft, like that's just not going to happen. So no matter what, like they're trying, but most of the games that people do want to play or are more interested in, at least, are just not going to make it to that streaming service because that's just too many hands in the pot. And I can't see that happening, especially with Nintendo trying to be so closed off to everything else. It's like, every Nintendo game is just Nintendo only, right? Like they don't really
Mm-hmm.
do a lot of cross-platforming, or if any, and that's unfortunate, right? Because I they have so much potential to really broaden it, and I feel like that it sucks because that's just where money keeps getting involved in all of this. Is that like all these companies could just come together and be super innovative and crazy, and like in a perfect world that'd be amazing. But I get it, it's a business first. You have to make money, you have to be able to feed the people that are, you know, working for you, and it creates that like little rivalry between each other that's just never going to die out.
Yeah. No, I agree. I feel like Nintendo, like you said, they're all about money, but the problem is that they don't realize the potential they could make from it. You know, if they really like worked hard on trying to push more of this stuff onto the Switch,
Mm-hmm.
it could work. But we're seeing that they're releasing them as ports like on their own, right? Like look at like Mario 64 with Sunshine, like that, the whole like that 3-pack, right? That came out.
Yeah. But isn't
I
that like
think they're going to do more of
$70,
those.
right?
It's like, well, it's like around 50.
Okay, so it's $50. But I mean, God, those games are not worth that anymore.
They're not. And that's, I mean, if you tried to buy like their original copies, oh yeah. Like Mario Sunshine already goes for like usually $60 alone.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great game, but I mean, come on.
After seeing that, that's what I'm like, you know what? Nintendo's just going to make it where they're going to, like for the N64, we'll probably never see a streaming service for it like how they have the other ones.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, they're going to just release packs like that. Like, next year, I bet we're going to see a Zelda one for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Probably like Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, and Skyward Sword.
That would be, actually, those 3 games are fantastic. So that
I would pick it up for sure.
I would probably buy that one, to be honest.
Because I'm a sucker for Wind Waker.
Anything Wind Waker, yeah.
I never really played too much Skyward Sword, so I'm kind of...
Skyward Sword's awesome, but I might have like a little bit of a nostalgia love for it. Because it's not like the greatest title for Zelda, but that was one of when I first moved back out here to San Diego, that was one of the first games I played again with my uncle. And how I've mentioned in the past, like when I was a kid growing up, we used to play Zelda games together.
Yeah.
That was like when I when I was 21, 22, moving back out here, we played Skyward Sword together again, and it just brought back all those feelings of playing Ocarina of Time and all that at together with each other. So like that, I think that was kind of nice because I would go to work and then I'd leave work, go over to his house, we'd have some lunch, and then we'd play some more Skyward Sword. And while I was gone at work, he would go and like collect bugs or little items and things like that, and then we would do the story together. So it was cool. It was really fun. But maybe that's just the experience rather than the game. I don't know, but. To me, it was a good game. I like the final fight.
I like the sword fighting.
Yeah, the sword fighting's cool, and the final fight was rad with Ganon.
That's what I hear.
It's beautiful. That whole like mirror scene where you're in the sky, visually amazing. But yeah.
Huh. Mm. I seriously think Nintendo's going to start doing that, where they're going to do those little 3-packs or something. Like, I bet you...
Star Fox Adventure. Yeah, that'd probably be one.
That'd be interesting. I think Metroid for sure will get one.
The Pikmin series will probably get one.
It might. I think because Pikmin 3 is still pretty new, I think maybe in like 2 years we might see it.
You might get like a Pikmin 1 and 2 combo.
Yeah, I think that's more likely.
Yeah.
I seriously think they're going to do it for Earthbound at some point. Like they're going to have Mother 1, Earthbound, and Mother 3
I would be
on
curious.
one. Which
it would be really cool if they did a full remake of Earthbound. I feel like they need to. Ness is in Smash. Lucas is in Smash. Like, there's a buzz there. They could get people excited about it.
They should just make something new. Because, I mean, like, I recently played Earthbound, and, like, honestly, it hasn't aged at all. Just because of how amazing the art was back then and everything about it. Like, it's as if it was released now.
Mm-hmm.
Even with the pulp culture references, like it's it's a game that like is timeless. And I used to always look at it like, why is this game so like put on a pedestal so high, right? Like everyone praises it. I'm like, this just looks like a cute game. And then I played it and I'm like, oh my God, like it'll stand the test of time. And I've only played a little bit of Mother 3, but from what I've heard, like it's a very deep story compared to Earthbound.
Right.
And that's why I'm like, oh, I'd be so excited if they like re-released it. Because I think I have a translated ROM that has the first one, and then I have Mother 3 too.
Oh, nice.
But if they would make a new story to it, it'd be interesting. I don't know if they would want to keep it in the bit style or do 3D. I would kind of hope if they kept it like pixel art.
I feel like it would kind of be like what they did with Link to the Past, that new version of it. So,
that'd be interesting.
Would be cute. I would play that. That'd be interesting. Yeah. So, I mean, there's always options out there for sure. But we'll see what they do, of course.
Yeah. They'll have something sneaky planned.
Yeah. But I mean, for me, one last thing that I kind of wanted to bring up too, that I wouldn't say like I'm an advocate. Like I'm not going to go out there and tell people go pirate games because why not, right? But I feel like through pirating games and through porting them over the years, it's gotten more and more people interested in not just game design, but computer science in general, right? Like as a broad topic, just to say like let's take Minecraft, for instance, right? So when it comes to modding, I would consider modding a form of pirating, right? Because you're taking the game and you're changing it and you're making it available for the masses, right? So like when you take that, like so many kids now learn Java and they've figured out something that they probably wouldn't have, like, because they don't teach it in school. Like when you're growing up in elementary school, like when I was a kid, I never thought, oh, I could make games as a future, right? Like it just wasn't part of it. So now these kids are learning like, oh, this is actually a skill that I can learn and develop and figure out something different to do with my life instead of just the stereotypical become a doctor, become a lawyer, those kind of aspects, right? So I feel like over the years, like because it started way back in the day, like with some of these games that have these like crazy, what was it? Like there's one game, I can't remember what it was called, but you had to put in like a color code, right? To play the game, but the color code was in the manual. So if you don't have a hard copy of that anymore, then you can no longer play the game. Like,
oh, that's weird.
Yeah, that was like one of the forms of getting around like people pirating the game. So what people did is they found the source code, they hacked it, and they got rid of that line of code basically. But like through that, they've learned how to read code and study and see what does what, right? So like there's something interesting to that and something kind of like liberating in a sense and exciting as far as like from an educational standpoint. Because they're learning a new skill to do something that they actually love. They want to play this game. So it's
right.
And like I feel like that's a super unfair thing to do as far as like game developers. The fact that you have to have the manual in front of you, type in a certain color code sequence in order to play this game, that's ridiculous. Just to try and get away from people pirating your game, come on, that's too much.
Well, a lot of games did that back in the day. I mean, some had it where like the intro scene would like pop up and you'd have to like match, like you said, with a color or like an object, and it was like in order to like prevented, right? Like it'd always be in the manual or something. Like there's always some kind of like little code or like a little secret that if you didn't have the manual. And there was no internet back in the day, so you wouldn't know.
Right.
And you were just SOL.
Yeah, see, that's too much.
Like real quick before we like coming back to how like my view on like this kind of stuff. The one thing that I'm fully for, not just for like, when I was talking about how things are so expensive now, but region locking. I mean, look at Terra Enigma. It only came out in PAL and Japan. Never came out here. I think it was on a virtual console, but other than that, like, it's never been put anywhere else. And I mean, it's an amazing game. Everyone should play it. And the only way most people can play it is through emulator.
Right.
And I mean, there's a lot of good games that didn't come out here. I've been really into playing translated games lately. I've actually been doing a lot of recording of like Super NES titles.
Nice.
And it's crazy how many titles are translated now. Like I look at like a few websites that kind of specialize it, and I'm like, wow, like people are still actively translating, and it's awesome. Like, it's cool seeing people still have that love and drive for these older games
that aren't going to get the love from the company themselves. So these are all fan-made translations, and like people have to actually do that. They have to learn how to do that. That's amazing.
And it's like titles that you've never heard of before. Like it's like the most random titles, you know, like obviously there's big name ones like Bahamut Lagoon and oh man, I'm trying to even think about some of the other big ones, but it's crazy. Like the small titles get translated and it's like, why? But at the same time, like it's cool. Like it's fun playing them. And there's like one I'm playing through right now. It's called, I think, Voice of Angel, and it's translated.
Right.
And when you look at it, it literally looks like an RPG Maker game, like early RPG Maker. And it's very basic, but the battle UI is kind of different, and it's just, it's homey. I guess that's the way you could say it. Like, it's a very, like, kind of simple RPG, nothing mind-blowing. Like, there's no reason why it would get released over here because JRPGs back in the day weren't big.
Right.
So there's a lot of these games that are just hidden over there. And I wish that like I could read Japanese so I could play all these games, because I'll look through like import videos and like other titles that are just lost in other countries, and I'm like, they look fun.
Yeah.
Like I want to experience these stories because it's like a book. Like I just want to read them all, you know.
Right.
I want to experience what someone made and dive into the world. And there's so many titles, and that's why when I see a new one translated, I'm like, ooh, I'm gonna try it out. Ooh, I'm gonna play that one. Like it's just, there's so much, and it's fun, and it's kind of overwhelming, but I love that people are still actively doing it. Like it's cool.
I feel like we just need to pay homage to those people, because people put a lot of time and effort into those games, and the fact that they're now lost in time, that sucks, right? And it wasn't even made that long ago. Like it's only been like 20, 30 years maybe, right? Like in the big scheme of it all, that wasn't that long of a time ago, and it's already lost. It's already gone. And most gamers now, like growing up, like the generation like beneath us, right? Or beneath us probably isn't the right term, but you know what I mean? Like the generation after us, they're growing up on these newer games, like these fast-paced, like I mean, like Fortnite. Come on, like right? Like there's better games to play than Fortnite, but a lot of these games are now hidden in time, and I feel like everyone should play older games. Like there's a game developer I heard that when his kid was growing up and wanted to play games, he didn't buy them the new system first. He bought them the first system. Atari. Like he bought them an Atari first, right? And he made them play through all of those before they got to a new system so that they can actually have an appreciation for where the art has gone.
It's actually a really cool idea. I mean, it'd be interesting to see like their take, like as games got more advanced.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I think would be great. And I think it allows people to appreciate it more in that aspect. And I feel like everyone should do that. Like, if you say you like games, play old games. But unfortunately, there's no way of playing most of those without emulating and pirating them now, which sucks. But I think we need to pay homage to those games. And we need to show these companies that we are interested in them and that we want to play them so that they get the ports that they deserve. Because 9 times out of 10, I feel like if it's available for purchase legally through these companies to help support these companies, we would buy them rather than just download them. So that's my take on that one, at least. So most of these companies have gone through, like, most of these companies look through ports and old games, and they're trying to figure out which ones will make the best profit for them so that they can keep them afloat, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of companies have gone through and created weird systems for anti-pirating, right?
Yeah.
So what are some of the ways that some of these companies have gone through and try to stop pirating?
So I'll start off with more modern titles and slowly work back.
Okay.
One that was kind of interesting, and it was a program, like, as a PC gamer for a long time, I started learning about all the different DRMs and some of the not so great things about them, like de novo and all of that. But there was one, it was called a Secure ROM. Mm-hmm. And basically it's a multi-layer anti-piracy, right? It was first on BioShock on the PC, and you would only be able to activate the game twice. So you can only install it twice ever, and then it gets locked out.
Oh.
So say you format your drive or you get a new computer, you've already installed it twice, boom. You're going to have to buy a new copy. Like, shitty.
That doesn't that doesn't even make any sense. Like, that's just not fair, right? Like,
oh yeah,
you own the game. It's yours.
Then you start going into, like, do you actually own digital stuff, but it's...
Well, Bitcoin, you own money, right?
you keep it, like, on a wallet that's, like, personalized to you.
That's true.
So, unless you buy it on, like, PayPal, then you don't actually own it. But, so the Secure ROM program, right? It was used for a little bit, but then EA picked it up. And EA did something a little different with it. For some titles like Mass Effect and Dragon Age, it would be a 10-day reactivation, right? So every 10 days you would have to reactivate it. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to play it.
That's a hassle.
It's a very big hassle. And then their biggest step was when Spore came out. And Spore is, like, known as one of the most pirated games, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I think within the first month or so, it was like over 1 million downloads. But EA was so fed up with it that they made it where you only could play it online. That way you could always constantly be checking if you're playing a pirated copy or not.
That's... wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Like, why, though? Like, what's... there? Okay. I guess I get it, right? They're losing money outright. So they're trying to make sure that people aren't pirating the game so that they can get the money that they deserve for making the game. But there's so much buzz around that, though, right? Like, it's a successful title.
Yeah. I feel like when it comes to, like, PC game anti-piracy, it's more so just comes down to, like, how crappy of a DRM you can get.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and for those people who don't know, what is a DRM exactly?
Basically, it's just a security anti-privacy. I don't know how the right way to say it, but basically, like, either a DRM is where, say, you buy something on Steam, you can only have it on Steam.
Okay.
But there are some, like, security ones too, like de novo, anti-tamper, secure ROM. There's a few other ones too, and then there's the whole anti-cheat programs as well. Right. But Secure ROM is kind of like the most known as being the worst. And when it comes to, like, PC games, obviously it's very easy to pirate those games. So there's going to be more extreme measures with them as well. But there was, I feel like most modern games have some little, like, way they can catch you cheating. You were telling me about one, I think with Just Cause, right?
I believe it was Just Cause, or it's one of those newer titles too, where
or it was Mirror's Edge. I think.
Yeah, Mirror's Edge. That's right. So with Mirror's Edge, that one's actually pretty funny. So if you play a pirated version of that game, you suddenly gain. Well, for people who don't know what Mirror's Edge is, it's basically parkour the game, right? So you're running around from tops of buildings and all this stuff, right? So your character actually develops a fear of heights and just won't jump. So whenever you come up to a ledge, like you'll be running, sprinting, and then all of a sudden she starts walking, and then like you look over the edge, and then she'll start backing away from the edge. So you just can't play the game. It's not possible. Which, I mean, it's funny, it's clever, but at the same time, it's like, okay, come on. Like the fact that you put in the time to code that, like, let's do something else.
It's kind of awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, right? It's a really funny way of getting around the idea of people pirating your games, for sure.
I like when they do dumb stuff like that rather than just a big like warning logo like this is an unauthorized copy. Like it's kind of
or like Alan Wake.
It's funny when they
have
do
you seen that one too?
No.
Alan Wake. If you play a ported or a downloaded game or a pirated game, you actually have a pirate eye patch on your Alan wears a eye patch the entire time, and he has the skull and crossbones symbol. So you can still play the game, but it's just silly, right? So you're just constantly reminded. Or what was the other one that had something silly like that? It was No Time to Explain, right? I think that's what it's called. Where all the people in the game are wearing pirate hats. So you still play it, but they're all wearing pirate hats, and like just to let them know, like, we know this is pirated.
That's funny. Yeah. I like when it's funny. There's definitely serious anti-piracy ones too, like coming back to Earthbound. They had it where if you played a hacked or pirated copy, basically the encounter rate would go up, and it would go up over time. So basically you would just see a map full of enemies. And I mean, it's an RPG where if you don't know anything about it, enemies appear on the map. It's not random encounters. So the map just gets filled with all these enemies, and it gets to the point where almost like you're just getting into battles every couple steps. If you somehow make it to the end of the game and you're fighting the last boss, when you beat the last boss,
no, it's not even when you beat it. It's when you encounter it, right?
It's like halfway through the fight.
Okay.
Like, there's a point where I don't want to spoil anything, but basically you're just about to beat the final boss, right? The game freezes, and the music's still going on, but it just freezes, right? The animation, everything. So then you have to reset the console. As soon as you reset it, you load it back up, your save file's gone.
That's so crazy. They delete your save file after that gauntlet that you went through to get there.
Yep.
You would think
I'm like dang.
Like well,
it's so mean.
They created like a hell mode for this game, and if people made it that far through that, like, just let them finish, right?
Yeah.
Talk about edging, right? Like, there you go. Earthbound is the ultimate edgelord, where it's like you
props to Nintendo.
You make it to the very end, and it's like, nope, you don't get to finish. We decide.
Like coming to another game on a Nintendo console, Banjo and Kazooie. They had it where this is more so cheat codes. If you used it, if you use it too many times, they'll delete your save file as well.
That's crazy. I hate that that's like the default. It's like, oh, you're cheating? Well, then, gone.
Yeah, at least make something stupid.
Yeah.
You know,
like in Animal Crossing with Rossetti, at least he just shows up and scolds you, right?
Oh, yeah.
So it's like having an angry dad yell at you, which is, I mean, that's funny, but nobody wants disappointed dad at the same time. So that's a good deterrent, right?
A little bit, yeah.
Not enough, though.
Another one that I found really interesting, and this is more so older games. Like I feel NES and going back to old PC like Amiga and C64 with Star Tropics. It had it where when you bought the game, it also came with a little letter. And when you would open the letter, it would have some writing on there, and then there was this big empty spot on it, right? So I think it's halfway through the game or 3/4 into the game. You'll get to a point, and they'll be like, "We need to find the radio frequency we need in order to progress the story."
Mm-hmm.
And they said, "Oh, it was in a letter from, I think, your dad or your uncle." The only way you could get that frequency was from that letter that came with the game. You would have to dip that letter in the water, and then it would show up on the piece of paper.
That's insane.
And that was the only way you could advance. If you didn't have that, you were screwed.
Well, how would you know to dip it in water even?
It would tell you.
Okay.
And the thing, this is not only for anti-piracy, but this was Nintendo's big fuck you to Blockbuster and like rental things. Like Nintendo had a very big grudge against rental services, right? And I went down a rabbit hole one time of looking up all their like preventive things, and I'll get into some of their stuff in a minute because it kind of pertains to piracy as well, because back in the day the best way to pirate games was through rental services.
Yeah, I guess that was the original pirate, right?
Kind of, because they could easily dump them, you know. But with the letter, I mean, there was no internet around then. I mean, they might have had BBSs back then, but even then, like, it was so early, you couldn't really, you were screwed.
Right.
And eventually, when Star Tropics was released on the Virtual Console, when you bought the game, you would get a virtual letter. And actually, when you read the little letter, they would virtually dip it in water for you.
Oh, okay.
And you would see the frequency number. And it was interesting because Nintendo did that with some other titles too, where they tried to prevent you from advancing if you didn't have your manual, which is bonkers.
I mean, as a collector now, how do you feel about that, right? Like, because I know that you want to collect older games, but if these games have these kind of locks on them where you need the manual, so that means you have to shell out an extra like $100 probably just to get a game with the manual included. Like, how do you feel about that?
Some games, yeah. Like if you want to collect like complete in box, like they can go up a pretty penny. Luckily, Star Tropics isn't that expensive, but I'm pretty sure if it comes with a letter, yeah, it'll probably be a little bit more. But it sucks, you know, because I mean, for me, I try to get games that are complete, at least like, you know, disc-based games, because it's cool to have the case and stuff. When it comes to cartridges like NES, Super Nintendo, Genesis, it's a little bit harder to collect them with the box and the manual, because back then no one really kept them. Everyone would get the game, throw the box out, have the manual, but then it would get lost. Like it's not like a PlayStation 1 game where you're putting the disc back in the case.
Well, those boxes got destroyed really easily. It was just a little cardboard box, right? So,
yep. And it sucks because, I mean, if you're a person that's totally against emulators and stuff like that, and you're trying to buy everything physically, if you don't get some of this like added stuff in the game, then you're not going to be able to advance it, you know, and it's a bummer. And
I can only imagine buying those games and not knowing that was a thing.
Oh yeah, imagine back then, especially because like, you know, it's not like you can just like with the PlayStation where you can just do like rest mode, you know, like it's like, oh well shit, now I need to like leave this game on for 5 hours while I drive to like Funko Land and see if I can find a copy with like a manual or something, you know, like it's back then that was tough. And
or as a kid, try and explain that to your parents.
Imagine renting this game from Blockbuster on the weekend. You got your pizza, you got your Mountain Dew or whatever, your Sprite, and you're just kicking it there, having fun with this game. And then it's like, what's the frequency? And you're like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like,
this is pre-internet, so you're not going to find any of that crap.
Yeah, you're like, you're freaking out because it doesn't have anything about that in the rental. Like, it's shitty. Yeah. And I swear though that I remember back in the day with Blockbuster, like I feel like with the cases sometimes they would have codes in them where if there was a preventive thing like that, I swear the cases had that. Like, I might need to do some more research on this, but I swear that they had thing, like they would have had the frequency on the case.
I'm sure with certain titles they did that. That would just make sense, right? Because how many times would people like demand refunds on their returns and all that?
Yeah.
So.
I swear I remember seeing that with some games. They're like, oh, make sure to do this, make sure to do this. And it's like, oh, okay. Yeah, I'm going to have to look into that because I'm kind of curious because I used to live at Blockbuster. I loved going there growing up.
Yep.
But another kind of going back into what I was saying about how Nintendo did some preventive measures. When they did for like the NES, and it was also on the Super NES as well, they called it's the 10 chip, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the console would have 10 chip, cartridge would too. And basically it was the way to authenticate if a cartridge was real or fake. And in the early days, early piracy, basically they would break off the 9th chip, right? The 9th chip would basically be kind of like the authorization. And for some games it worked. You know, you break it off and everything would be fine. But a lot of games it didn't work. And so they tried to find a new way around that. And especially with the Super Nintendo, you have to patch the games if you wanted to play it like on original hardware. Because the SRAM would only go to, it would know what the game was supposed to be running its RAM at, right? And say you used, well, okay, so back then it was a little different, right? Like nowadays we have the EverDrives where we can put an SD card and a cartridge and plug it into our Super Nintendo and play like our list of like 100 ROMs, right? Back then, I think it was, oh my God, what was it called? It was like Magic Swap, or it was something swap. And basically you would have, it would be floppies. It would be this top loader you would put on top of the Super Nintendo. You would put this floppy in with whatever game that you wanted on there. It would also play region locked games too. Like it would have a slot on top of it where you could put PAL or Japanese ones in there too.
Okay, cool.
So it would bypass that. And the problem is this thing with the SRAM, it would read like triple, obviously, because it can read more games. So in order to play these pirated games, you have to patch it to fool the system that, oh, it's only running at this RAM. So Nintendo kept realizing, like, when these new things were coming out, like, we need to find a new way to get around it, right? And it's interesting because when you look at this, like, swap thing on top, it looks a lot like their, like, Famicom disk system, which, I mean, that was a really interesting thing, too. And I think it, from what I remember reading, it was kind of canned because of piracy in Japan. Like, it never came out over here. It was only in Japan. And basically, the disc system was the NES version of playing games at, like, kind of a better FPS. And people were able to pirate it because it ran on floppy disks, kind of. Like, it was, like, special Nintendo-branded floppies. And people found ways to create their own versions of these. And it kind of ruined that little accessory.
Right.
But it's interesting seeing how Nintendo has tried to get around it. And one I found really interesting, this is probably the last one I'll like bring up, but Donkey Kong Country 2. It was one of the first titles on there that had kind of like multi-layers of anti-piracy, right? Not only did it have the whole 10 chip and the whole SRAM, right? But if you tried to edit the SRAM, like in the code, if you look through, like, you know, all the numbers and letters and symbols and stuff, you would see like thief written into it.
Really?
Yeah, like it'll show like thief in there, knowing that you're trying to edit the RAM.
Oh, wow.
And then not only that, but say, you know how some ROMs, there'll be like, you know, intros added from whatever like hacking group did it, or trainers to make the game easier, like if you wanted 99 lives, right? It would take preventive measures by cutting the screen size down so you wouldn't be able to exit the screen randomly, or barrels wouldn't be able to break, or, you know, you wouldn't be able to jump on an enemy. Like they there was so many layers to it that prevented people from pirating it.
That's just so much extra work.
Oh yeah.
That's
I found it interesting how that was the title that like really had a ton of it.
I wonder why. That's interesting.
I mean, it was a big title, you know, but
yeah,
it's weird.
That's
oh, and then real quickly, I mean, this was released like maybe a day or two ago, and I mean, take it with a grain of salt. I mean, this is a leak that just came out about Nintendo, and some of these you have to be kind of careful with, but this was a leak from 2013, I think, and it seems like some of it was from like maybe like a 4chan leak, so I mean, take that even more with a grain of salt. But
it is 4chan, so yeah.
This leak kind of shows Nintendo's kind of PI aspect when it comes to anti-piracy. So every big company has like a PI kind of service, right? Where they try to make sure that everyone, like the business, isn't being messed around with, right? So there was this hacker, right, for the 3DS, and in these leaks, basically, it's showing like I don't know how to describe it. I don't want to say plot, but basically it's a timed transcript of them meeting with this person at a hotel, right? Trying to offer them a deal to come work for them, right? And it's a flow chart saying like, if this person agrees to it, answer with these questions. If they disagree, answer with these. And ultimately, if they disagreed, it would be legal action, right?
Right.
If he agreed, they offered up and coming technology to work with and like different things to help work on like their projects, right? And it's interesting because you read it and it's like, oh, this is kind of weird, like, you know, how detailed it is. But it goes to show you like Nintendo has it where if there's like a big hacker like presence or something, it looks like they try to buy them in, you know, and I get that happens with a lot of like hackers, right? Like a company will be like, you know, cybersecurity. If someone can find a vulnerability, they're going to try and bribe the hacker with like, hey, come over here. Like,
yeah, help build up our network that you just broke, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And it seems like that's what they're trying to do with their stuff. Like with this 3DS thing, I mean, apparently there were logs later that this guy actually did help them later on. So it was interesting reading that. Like I said, I mean, you could take this as a rumor, or you could take this as an actual leak, but it was interesting. And it's like, like Nintendo watches a lot more than people think.
And with all those stories, there's always like a grain of truth in all of it, right? So Nintendo really probably did reach out to this person or something like it, or a group of people that were hacking their systems because they're so notoriously known for hating piracy and hating people who hack their stuff. So of course they would bring in people who know how to do it well to make systems in place to make it even more difficult for others, right? So it's interesting, and I'd be curious to see what like those quote unquote pirators or hackers did when offered positions in those companies. Like, did they take them, or are they, you know, kind of like on their Robin Hood kick and say, no, I don't want to do this, like, because these games should be for the people, right? Like, what do you do in that situation? Because most of these hackers are probably just like kids or, you know, mid-20s people that like don't have a lot of money. So if they get caught up in a legal like lawsuit against Nintendo, they're done. Like their life is over. Yep. So they don't really have a choice at that point. Yeah, that's scary.
Yeah. There was one interesting thing that kind of came from the leak too, was that there was a prototype for like, it looks like before the Switch, their idea, and just from the image, it looked like a Super NES controller, but there were two joysticks kind of in the middle of it, and then I guess the rest of it was a screen. So it kind of looked like mobile gaming, but instead of like the controls being on the screen, it's like in the middle of the screen, like sticking out.
Weird.
It was weird, yeah. But I don't know. It was kind of interesting. A little off topic, but it was kind of cool.
I mean, that's really interesting, and it plays into the idea of pirating, like what some of these companies are willing to do to help, stop pirating games and stop hackers and whatnot.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for us today.
Yeah.
I think that was a really interesting conversation, and if you guys liked it, join our Discord. Let us know what you think. But I think before we sign off here, I think we have one final special little thing for y'all. What do you got for us, Chris?
I know the question of the week. I'm not going to be that, I'm not going to say, oh, do you play, pirated games? No, I'm not going to say that. Instead, I'm going to say...
We should, so that we can send it all to those companies. And then... No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. And we're going to get money from it, too, so you better watch out.
No.
Let's go with a little more of a safe one. Do you think it's okay to play translated games or games that were region locked? So in a sense, say Terra Enigma, if you live in the US, do you think you're justified by being able to play it through a ROM, stuff like that? I could say even if you wanted to buy a repro of it, because I know some people think it's okay if they buy a repro off Etsy, of Terra Enigma. But yeah, if you think it's cool, and hey, if you know any fun translated games, let us know too, because I want to find more.
Yeah, me too. That'd be great. All right, so thank you again for listening to us this week, and once again, join our Discord, join the conversation, ask questions, drop some stuff. We have some cool channels in there. Actually, one of the channels that we have currently is the anime channel, right? So it's drop all the anime that you love, and if there's anything new or interesting that you're excited about, put it in there, and we'll definitely check it out. Or if we've seen it, we'll throw in our feedback on what we thought about it too. But yeah, so that's going to do it for us. Thank you again, and bye.
Bye.